How you going, guys? Curtis from Cutting Edge Engineering. Today's job, we're going to be continuing with the upgrades on our big lathe. We're going to be fitting the scale for the y-axis, or the length of the lathe, also be installing the coolant tank and a work light. And we're doing all that because it's going to make using this lathe a lot easier for some of these big jobs we've got coming up. One of the main issues with not having coolant on the machine is jobs tend to heat up, and you do need to allow time for them to cool off before you finish machining them, or you could end up being undersized or oversized. And having the y-axis on the digital readout will just make it a lot faster for machining parts. Because what I've been using is the standard dials that came on the machine, and they are only in 1mm increments. Having a digital readout on it, we can be a lot tighter with our tolerances, and that means I don't have to set up dial indicators or anything like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is fit the scale. So what we got was a 5 meter magnetic digital readout scale. We did get that from Heron Forbes, and this was about $2,500. What it comes with is 5 rails. There's also the cable, which has the connector on one end and the magnetic reader on the other. We've also got a couple of bags of hardware, which are some screws and a few brackets. So we have 7 of these brackets. They are drilled and tapped aluminium plate, and they get mounted onto the bed. And a smaller bracket is then mounted onto that, which has a key in it, and that has a corresponding slot on the rail. There is also the 2 rolls of magnetic tape that go on the back of the rail. So I have installed scales before because I have had to replace them on my other 2 lathes, but they are a single piece glass scale, which does make them quite easy to fit, but they are very delicate. This scale, because it is magnetic, it is very forgiving. You're not too worried about bumping it or knocking it and doing any damage. But instead of this being one 5 meter length, it's made up of 5 1 meter lengths, which is going to make this a little bit more tedious to fit. So before we get started fitting the new scale, there are some brackets on the back of the bed that need to be removed. They were from a scale that was on there that the previous owner had since removed. So those brackets mount over the top of this pipe. That pipe has all the electrical in it that control the carriage, and it runs from the box all the way to the other end of the bed. So I wasn't going to use those to mount the new scale because they're not in the right location, and that would mean the scale would be too far away from the bed. That would make it exposed to swarf and coolant. I'd like to get the scale as close to the bed as possible to help protect it, because these scales don't actually come with a cover. Something I need to be aware of is where everything is underneath the carriage. When I mount the scale on there, I can't let it interfere with anything while the carriage is moving. Placement of the brackets and where the scale sits is very important. So now we can get on to mounting our new brackets. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the carriage all the way to the closest point at the headstock. This lathe actually has about 5.5 meters of travel, and our scale is only 5 meters long. So I'm going to mount the scale as close to the headstock as it needs to be. So I'm just going to get my first bracket bolted together, and that'll give me an indication on how much room I've got to work with. First bracket somewhere there. But that wiring pipe's going to be a bit of a problem, so I'm just going to undo it and move it down out of the way. Enough clearance. So we've got our first location. I'm just going to use a piece of flat bar to set the height to the top of our bracket. I'm just going to use a scribe to mark the location, then I'm going to use a center punch, and then I can drill and tap it to suit an M5 thread. Now with the first position drilled, I'm going to use a rail to mark the position of the next bracket. Now I'm going to move the carriage back to the headstock so it's out of the way, so I can carry on drilling and tapping our bracket positions. So now we've got all the holes drilled, we can mount all of our brackets. So when mounting the brackets, you need to make sure they are parallel with the bed and they are all in alignment. So the brackets do have allowance to make adjustments up and down and in and out in order to bring everything into alignment. Because lathe beds are a casting, they're not always parallel or straight. The other end of the machine, there is a bit of a misalignment that would have been due to the casting process. So we are going to have to pack the brackets off the far end of the lathe. No adjustment necessary. Righto, so that last bracket is not fitting very well, and that's due to the rough casting. There's a lot of material missing on this end. So I'm going to leave this bracket till last. I am going to go back to the first two and readjust them to suit the brackets in the middle, and then we can start to fit the rails. Once the rails are on there, I'll then address this end bracket. That one's right. What's the next one? 45. So in this kit, 2 of the 5 rails are longer than the others, and those are the end rails, and they have threads in them for the end caps. So if you're using one of these kits, make sure you're aware of those things. So when fitting these rails, there is a bit of adjustment between the lock blocks and the rail. So I'm just going to take a measurement so I can get the height of the rails level all the way down the bed. So we're up to fitting the last rail, and I did think I may be able to move the bracket back towards the headstock a little bit, but it would mean that there was too much unsupported rail. So I am going to make up a spacer block and put the bracket at the end where I've already drilled it. So we finally got our brackets at our rail mounted. Everything's nicely in alignment. That took a little bit longer than you might want it to, but because it's done in pieces and there's so many parts that you have to adjust, it is a little bit time consuming. So the next thing I need to do is fit the magnetic strip, and then on top of that, we'll fit the metal protective strip. Right, with all that done, what I'm going to do next is refit the electrical pipe. I can't put that back in the original position because it will interfere with the scale and the eye, so I am going to utilise the original brackets that we pulled off the lathe to hold that pipe in place. Righto, now that that's on, before I fit the reader to the carriage, I am going to fit up the coolant tank and make sure everything works. Cut that hose, that's fine. We'll just check to make sure that hose does a full loop and comes back without kinking. Trim that down, eh? So with that all connected, let's turn it on and see if it works. Right, so that all works, but before I fill this, I am going to tidy up this lid because it doesn't quite fit. More folding it. Finish it with the grinder. And one other thing I'm going to do is fit the tap and the lock line onto the carriage. Now I can fill up the tank, but I'm only going to use water. I don't want to waste coolant in case there are any leaks. So that's our coolant tank system completed. Everything's working really well. So now we're going to finish installing the reader for the scale.
Oh.
You over there, because you're a meanie. So I do have a few spare brackets floating around from other digital readouts and scales that I've fitted to machines, and I've picked out one that is going to work perfectly. Might have to modify it a little bit. So I've got to do a few modifications to this bracket so it fits nice and neatly, so let's take it to the mill. The first thing I'm going to do is mill 2 slots, and that'll give adjustment for the sensor on the bracket. So the distance between the bolt holes on the sensor are 73 mil, so that'll be the distance between the slots we mill. So now I'm just going to mill out the corner, and that'll allow it to fit around a plate on the carriage. And the last thing we need to mill are the two slots that mount the bracket to the carriage, and that'll give us adjustment up and down. So with that modified, we can fit the reader to the carriage. So we've got everything mounted onto the carriage now. The reader doesn't actually touch the scale at all. There is supposed to be a gap. So we have given it about 1/2 mil gap, and we'll just give it a test run and see if everything works. So the connector on this cable is compatible with the eSIM digital readouts. If you run a different readout, there are instructions in the kit on how to rewire it to suit your particular screen, or there are adapter cables. So plug that in, first go, that's all working really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zero out my dial and the screen, and I'm going to wind it 100 mil to make sure they are measuring accurately together. So that's working spot on. We're going to tighten everything off and get all those cables strung up together out of the way. So with all that tidied up, there's one last thing I need to do, and that is fit the work light. So the work light we got, it is also from Heron Forbes. It was about $186. This one is a 14 watt 5700K LED work lamp. It does swivel both at the head and the base, and the arm does articulate as well. So conveniently, this light has a plug, so you can just plug it straight into an extension lead. Ideally, I would like to have this wired into the lathe along with the digital readout, but I'm not an electrician, so I'm just going to use an extension lead for the time being. So that's the light fitted and working. Last thing I want to do is just run the carriage from one end of the bed to the other to make sure there's no issues with the scale. Righto guys, so that's all the upgrades to our big lathe completed. We've got everything installed and working. So that took about half a day. The majority of that time was actually mounting the scale and getting it all set correctly, so all those brackets were in alignment. So now it's ready for those bigger jobs coming up, and it's going to make it that much easier and enjoyable to use. Thanks for watching. What?
Go.
What's blah blah blah?
You got it.
Blah 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 blah. You ready? Ready?
Yeah.
Right, ready?
Yep.
Are you ready?
Yep.
You ready?
Yeah.
Ready? You ready? Ready?
No, hang on. Okay.
How you going guys? Curtis from Cutting Edge Engineering. Today's job we're going to be... Oh, fuck me.
This happens every
It
time.
does. So the first thing I'm going to do is check the clearance around the... Fuck. Help. So the brackets do have adjustment allowance. So the brackets do have a allowance. So that's the work light fitted... Oh, work light.
Just the light.
Right. So that's the light fitting. Oh, fuck
My
me.
lord.
So now we're going to get back on to refit. So now we're going to get on to finish. So now we're going to get on to fitting the reading eye. Oh fuck me! What are we calling it?
I'm just wanting it to make sense. It seems
then, it's
like
not-
it doesn't.
No. So this kit comes. So I need. Fuck, hang on. Fucking. Wait, what? Fuck. So when fitting these rails, there is a bit of a So when fitting these rails, there is a bit of a
What?
So when fitting these rails, there is a bit of adjustment between the lock block. Oh, fuck off you. So I'm going to let... fuck off, train. Last thing I want to do is just... Oh, there's our infamous chicken bone.
Oh god. Why didn't you throw the chicken bone out? Well, you said that's bad juju, and this is what happens.
Thought I did throw
You
it out.
broke the lathe. This is the most hideous setup I've ever seen.
Biggest center punch in the world.
You're gonna want that thing down there, aren't you? I'm not moving.
I should have got my stuff before I came up the window. I need to get a smaller punch. I can't see past it.
I love how organised you're not. What are you looking for?
Tunnels.
There?
That's them.
Oh my god. What are you looking for? A washer? There's one there.
I don't know.
You're painful.
Oh, I can't reach it.
The Disney princess. Oh, hello. He's over there. Go out there. That's where they know to go. That's why he's over there. Hey, sorry, they don't care. They're birds. Where is he? Where'd he go?
What's the problem? Oh, wait, oh, you're wet. You're wet. You're wet.
I can hear George.